Welcome to From X to Z, the show that believes you never age out of learning about the world around you. Featuring social media maven Danielle Farage and Mervyn Dinnan, the analyst who puts the X in expert. They're here to talk all things jobs, HR, and trends. So mind the generational gap. This is From X to Z, only on the Purple Acorn Network.
Welcome back. Hello, Mervyn. How you doing?
I'm doing really good, Danielle. And how are you? You've been traveling recently, haven't you?
I have been. I've been all over the States, and I'm going to be in Vegas pretty soon for ERE, so I'm very excited. And yeah, it's just been a crazy month. Lots of conferences, lots of conversations, and hopefully it will be warming up pretty soon. So I'm excited. My favorite season is spring, so I am really looking forward to this.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Yes, where I am in London, England, it's been very warm recently, unseasonably warm. Although it's coming into Easter, so of course it's not going to be so warm. But never mind.
All right, well, at least it'll be festive. We like
Yes,
that.
yes.
Okay, well, I don't know about you, but I've been having a lot of really interesting conversations. I had a video go kind of viral, the one from Transform, where I was talking about the biggest misunderstanding about my generation being that we're lazy, and have been receiving a lot of comments about that post.
Yeah,
And I think it has a lot to do with our conversation today, which is great.
yeah.
Maybe I'll even get a chance to pull up that video and talk through some of the comments that I got. But I want to dive into the story today, which is this piece by news.com in Australia,
Yeah.
essentially talking about how Gen Z is taking over the workplace in a big way, and bringing a lot of just change, I would say, to the way that we work, and changing the norms. And so, just to kind of summarize the article, the three kind of things that stood out to me were: one, we're challenging traditional work norms. We're changing boundaries. We're arriving late. We're coming in early. We're going to the gym. We're going to the gym during work hours. So we're doing things that might increase our productivity, but without much concern for how it might impact other people. So we'll talk about that. The second thing was that there's a huge value shift, and we've talked a little bit about this before, between Gen Z versus boomers and Gen X, who often equate hard work with long work hours and formality. So we'll go into that. And then the third and final thing that I noticed from this article was more about like the cultural moments that are redefining professionalism, the things that often start on TikTok. We've heard of bare minimum Mondays, act your wage, loud leaving, which really reflect this like broader movement to normalize boundary setting, on the part of Gen Zers. And yeah, I have a lot of opinions. I'm sure you do too. So just straight off the bat, like what kind of stands out to you about this article specifically?
Um, what stood out for me was the fact that a lot of the things we talk about on these chats is how the world of work is changing, and how your generation is bringing, I suppose, less formality, is maybe seeing things in a different way. I wouldn't call it casual, but it's not as formal as it used to be. As I think I probably said in a previous episode, when I started work, anybody who was more senior to you had to be called Mr., Mrs., or Miss. It wasn't, you couldn't use their first name or something. Although
Mhm.
they were a colleague, they were your supervisor, you had to call them Mr., Mrs., or Miss. And obviously, thankfully, that's all changed. So I think that there will be, and we've said it before, there will be people who are slightly older in the workplace who miss certain formalities. Some of it might come with the feeling authority is being chipped away at, because rather than we work these hours, this is when you take your lunch. and it's now kind of, I'll go to the gym because it's quieter then I'll come back in and I'll do an extra hour at the end, and I'll fit it around my social life, and and that kind of lack of formality, I think, is what grates maybe in some more structured organizations with people who are in senior positions, management, leadership, and feel that they should be dictating culturally what happens in the organization, and maybe feel that they are less empowered because your generation is just doing what they want to do. But one thing I would say is, and I know we're supposed to disagree from time to time, you do tend to get the work done, but maybe not in the way that others would like you to do it.
Yeah, and I can't help but think as you kind of talk about the way in which things are unfolding, that we are trying to apply an old operating system to a more modern world, right? Where we have democratized access to information, we've democratized access to learning. We have, we've placed value on different things. And so when you try to apply these old world mentalities of, I'm older and more experienced, and therefore you have to do what I say, it doesn't fly well with this generation. We don't respect you because you're coming from a place of, this old world mentality when it's like, well, the world has changed. Like, why don't you wake up a little bit and look around? And I think that, from my view, it's like, well, we have the opportunity to give people a voice and talk about the way in which they work best, to talk about what works best for the team as a whole, and take these things more seriously rather than just kind of, the lip service that we typically hear, which is we're a family and like this culture is amazing, like, but it's really not. And so I think that like this kind of poses an opportunity. It's like you could either lean in and like hear what people are saying and kind of derive that from their actions, or you could try to keep doing the command and demand mentality.
Command and control.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course there's these things, mobile phones, the kind of technology,
What's that?
which again, what you know what I mean. Um, Mobile phones, you know what I mean. The
I don't
again,
know.
I think in a previous thing when we were talking about kind of return to office and those kind of things, I said about a generation of management and leadership who can only really manage people if they're sitting in front of them. And I think that we have 24/7, 365 access to everybody that we know through our smartphones, through our tech. And so it's, whereas previously it was, there was almost a deference. It was kind of, excuse me, is it possible? Can I ask you a question? No, I'm very busy. Come back, after lunch, or that kind of approach within structured organizations has gone out the window now, because it's kind of, you've got email, you've got kind of, you don't
Yeah.
need to say, can I see you for 5 minutes? I just want to check something. You just send them a message. And that has changed. And maybe the approach from leadership and management is that whilst it adopts it because it's a two-way street. They've obviously got access to you all the time as well, but it maybe somehow takes away a little bit of the, not the power, but the authority that they feel they have to maybe kind of say, no, this is how I want you to do it. This is how I want you to do what I want you to do, and it's more kind of you saying, no, this is how I'm going to do it. So I
Right.
think there might be the generational part might be that interplay where it's kind of people still coming to terms with the fact that it's very different to when they started in the workplace.
Right. So you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just trying to understand, like when technology came into the picture, and because everyone kind of communicates differently, and also the fact of younger generations are digitally native, so
Mm.
therefore we know how to do things a lot faster
Yeah.
typically. um you're saying that that takes a little bit of the authority away from the people at the top because they can't necessarily dictate how people do things anymore.
In a way, yes, I think so. I think there's definitely um, that could be part of it, particularly if you've got, I suppose, a generation of senior management who, are coming towards retirement and therefore would kind of can remember before all of this digitization stuff. Um, but yes, it has changed. I mean, it's kind of the as I say, the access, the way you can just communicate with the people around you, with colleagues, whether they're physically there or not, is very different. And it might well be that the way that Gen Z, this career trend gripping Australian workplaces, is Gen Z basically structuring their working day to suit themselves,
Mm,
but getting the work done at the same time. And
yeah.
maybe that takes a bit of authority away from, no, I want you to structure your working day the way I want it structured, from maybe a more senior level.
Well, it takes trust,
Yeah, trust is the word.
and it feels like, and I think I've talked about this a lot, especially post COVID, like when you try to apply old world models to new world ways of working. For example, I need to see you in the office to know that you're working hard, work whatever that working hard means. That's just one example. And if you're not at work in person, then I don't know that you're working hard or that you're working at all. And therefore, I'm going to demand that you come in. Um, and I think that's like a prime example of, that sort of trying to apply that old world mentality.
Mm,
But it doesn't work. And what I've also noticed is that, this whole notion of professionalism and what we place value on has really changed.
mm,
And when I think about, these like trends that come up, like the bare minimum Mondays and all those, like I can't help but think we have placed value traditionally on, you know, the pedigree of the type of company you work at and the school you go to. But more and more often, we have placed value on the preposterous things that people say online. And I can't help but think that that's like kind of changed the way that we value professionalism, because professionalism is this very old world way of thinking, right? It's like, well, and I'm like actually curious like what you think of that term and what value it places and what it brings to us as a society. I think of it as like a boundary, and that boundary might look different for different people. But I feel like young people just don't value professionalism because they don't understand the value of it, because there's so much value being placed on, again, the crazy things that people say and do, and the opportunity to get rich and famous from it, or start a TikTok because you videotaped yourself getting fired and you posted it online for the world to see, and now who knows where that girl is. I actually don't know what happened to a lot of the people who did that. I should probably look into it, but yeah, that's I think one of the bigger shifts that I've noticed.
mm. Yeah, and also there is a loss of control because you can post these things, as you say, so I've just been fired, or and go onto TikTok, and before you know it, everybody in the organization and in all the other offices of the organization have seen it, um, uh, before you've even let other people know it's happened. So I think there is an element of that there is this, I think control is a good word, because it's certainly different layers of management, supervisor, manager, all the way through, within more structured organizations, don't have, they have the respect and the authority, but they maybe, don't have the control they used to have, because things are happening around them before they even, things have happened before they even know it.
Right.
And so and as you say, it's kind of, before they even know that that person has quit, it's everybody else knows it because they've seen it on TikTok. So I think there is some of that is, coming to terms with, well, it's a different way of leading an organization, a different way of management, a different way of taking responsibility for other people and helping them grow in their careers and things. So I think that it has opened it up, democratized it, if you like. It's made it very visible, and it's kind of, it's accountable. So it's kind of, if you can't say, in a private meeting, you can't say, look, just between you and me, because the chances are, if it's something really interesting that a person listening to it knows other people are going to want to know about, they'll just go and tell them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, if I think back, as I say, on all of these, when I started work, if I had a meeting with a manager and he said, look, just between you and me, then I wouldn't say anything to anybody, because I think, I'd lose my job if I did. Whereas now, firstly, it's a kind of, well, if that's the kind of organization they're going to be, then I don't care if I lose my job. And secondly, it's kind of, what do they want to keep secret?
Yeah.
Why? It's kind of a taking a slightly taking away, I suppose, a certain sense of authority. And that is why some people what is this new trend? What is this going to the gym at 11 o'clock because it's quieter? And not actually seeing possibly how that time is made up.
Yeah. Well, also it's like the right to have secrets, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I feel like this wasn't a trend that Gen Z started. Like, none of this is really anything that this generation started. It's what we inherited and what we're doing with it. And so before the pandemic, I imagine, and I know that a lot of people were working remotely. And I imagine of those people working remotely, they had, started to really create their life around work and with work in mind, but not exclusively to work. And I think when you work from an office, it's a lot more constrained. It's like, if you don't have energy on a Monday morning, you still have to be there and sit and be unproductive if that's what it is. And that I take issue with, because that is not a helpful use of your time. Whereas if you were to shift the day, like I could talk about myself in this way too. Like, if you shift the day, you might be actually more productive at the end of the day than you are at, let's say, 9 a.m. on a Monday, because you're still getting over the Sunday blues, right? And so I think it's for me, I think it's not something new. I think it's something that has just not been out in the open as much. And you have a generation that values transparency so much so that we're altering the behavior of, we're trying to alter the behavior of leadership and demanding more transparency. And also, we want to be transparent and we want to lead with, by example. And I think that that's what we're seeing. And I think the reaction is from those older generations who don't really understand why. Like, why are you sharing your personal problems or your mental challenges with me? This is a professional, quote unquote, setting, but we don't understand what that actually means. So for you, Mervyn, I'm actually really curious to hear, like, what do you think is the value of professionalism, and and I guess we've talked a little bit about how that's changed, but like, yeah, I'm just curious, like, how you view it and maybe what it was like when you were entering work.
It's an interesting one, because I worked, as I've said before, I think on previous episodes, my first few years certainly were in a professional services environment. So it was very structured. We had levels of partners, senior managers, junior managers, supervisors, levels of seniority and responsibility. And so you were always respectful. You always, it was more a case of, not wanting to please people, but knowing that those people had authority. They had, the potential to impact your career.
Mm-hmm.
You got reviewed every 3 or 6 months, and you sat down and went through the review, and they tell you things you've done well, they tell you things you hadn't done well, tell you where they feel you needed to change, where you maybe needed to be a bit more serious about things in the workplace, and those kind of things. And I suppose for that generation and the generation after it, to be honest, that's how you started working life. And we're talking about working life in offices and things. We're not talking about in hospitality, leisure, construction, and things like that, but mainly what we would call, I suppose, knowledge work, wisdom work, that kind of thing. And so it was very, as I say, internally very structured, because people had to have levels of responsibility. So you were responsible for these things, and then somebody more senior was responsible for that. And so I think that has been somehow broken down, in that you still, in an organization, I come back to the headline we started with about, unique demands. It's not really unique. It's just kind of, it's just wanting, as I say, to structure the day differently, or to kind of do things when you are, do the stuff that needs energy when you've got most energy. And not as I think I said in the previous episode, my working day was 9:30 to 1 o'clock, and 2 o'clock to 5:30. But in an office environment, then literally at 2 minutes to 9:30, the office was empty, and in that 2-3 minutes around 9:30, it filled with everybody. At lunchtime, it was empty, and everybody ran back, in that 2-3 minutes at the end of lunch. And at 5:32, you could hear a pin drop. There was nobody there except the most senior people.
Mm-hmm.
And that work has changed in that, from the amount of time I've been in the workplace, because that's no longer the norm for a lot of organizations. People work more flexibly, and this is before we're talking about remote, flexible, hybrid working. Times are more flexible. People particularly are balancing, you have families, you have two working couples, in a relationship, got to balance their time. And so that had all begun to change. But with all of these changes over the years, you get a certain, I won't say eating away at the authority of more senior leadership, but it's, I suppose, less in control. So if you think back to what I just said when I started work, managers, supervisors were very in control. They knew when you were going to be there. They knew that they could see you in those times, and they knew that the times you wouldn't be there, and they knew that you would ensure that you got all your work done. And if you couldn't get your work done, you would stay late. You wouldn't just say, well, I'm done with it today, I'll finish off in the morning. If you had something to finish, you'd finish it. And I think that is the slightly more flexible approach to doing work as and when you do it, and as and when you have the space to do it at the right time. I think is something which I guess that to a more senior or more older level of management is still something they're not getting used to, which is why they see this all about trends and kind of it's kind of they don't believe that people in Gen Z are working flat out. That's where that kind of comes from. It's kind of because you've got a slightly more relaxed approach to your diary, if you like, and the order in which you do things. It looks like you're not taking work seriously.
Yeah. And I view, my role in all of this as the person who seeks to empower the next generation in terms of communicating respectfully, right, with their managers and their leaders, and finding the best ways of working for them. Because I really do believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to work best and learn how they work best. And on the other side of the coin, I feel like it is my responsibility to also educate and enable the leaders themselves to understand these younger generations, and to come in with empathy, and to come in, with an understanding of who we are and what we value, and be ready with the right questions. And come in with that listening ear, rather than the whole, well, you need to work your way up, and like that's when you get respected in the workplace. And I mean, I could flip through some of the comments on my post, because I just keep getting, I mean, it's at 4 million impressions, so it's gone pretty much across the internet. But let's see, what's a
You
good
should have
one?
tagged me in, Danielle.
Oh, you
I
didn't
don't
see
get
this
4 million
post?
impressions. You should have tagged me in at the very beginning so I get some of those impressions as well.
That's so funny. Well, I have one person who said, typical Gen Z isn't bad post, lots of fluff repackaged as some kind of profound generational insight. That's funny. Um, we want meaningful work and growth. No kidding. So did boomers, Gen X, and millennials. The difference I've observed in my interactions as a recruiter is that previous generations understood they had to earn their spot, not just demand it.
I saw that comment, yes. Um, yeah, again, I suppose that's what I've just been saying kind of, earlier on in this chat. It's kind of, it's a different approach to management and leadership in that, you had to earn, I suppose, the right to be trusted. Whereas, it's almost like, you're expecting leadership and management to earn your respect by allowing you the flexibility.
Yeah, and well, I find it to be more like, I always had this question when I came into the workplace. It's like, why is it that we place little to no value on young people in society generally, right? It's like, oh, you're a kid, you don't know anything. Rather than, that's an incredible idea. What, like, tell me more about this vision, you know? And we come from a place of like shaming young people for having crazy ideas and letting their imagination run wild. And it's reflected in the education system. It's reflected in the way that we teach kids. And it continues into work. And so as I am a young person, I'm like, oh, like I have all these amazing ideas. I need leadership that like sees my value and empowers me with the right guidance and tools and resources, not one that's going to be like, no, actually, that's dumb, whether they say it directly or not. And, doesn't promote me for years. And like, I feel like I don't do anything impactful and I don't get recognized. Like, I find that the way that we treat young people in society is just like kind of backwards. And at the same time, I don't think that we're perfect at all, right? Like young people are misguided. Like if we don't have the right leadership and the right people to guide us in the right directions. And so that's why I am an advocate for intergenerational connectivity, because I
Mm.
do believe that we are better together. And just like you and me, like if we can have a conversation, I do believe that we can get to a point where anyone of any generation can have this kind of sit down conversation.
Yes, yes, but that's because I'm a very easygoing guy, and it's kind of I respect people like you who
Thank
are
you.
really making your way and doing so. No, no, I mean even if you weren't making your way, that doesn't mean I wouldn't respect you, but I mean it's kind of yeah. I think that there is, and don't forget the thing with the elder people is that they feel that I suppose less experienced people, old and young, then we're going to start some kind of culture war or something. But yeah, but the moment a page on their phone is stuck or something, come over here, get me off this page. I can't work out what's going on.
Yeah,
So when it comes to technology, it's a case of find me a young person that knows what to do.
it very much is. Well, I feel like
Yeah,
that's a beautiful place to end this episode.
yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. This has been From X to Z, your favorite intergenerational podcast. And join us back next week where we will continue this laziness centric conversation and get into some additional really fun stuff. So thank you so much, and we'll talk soon, Mervin.
We will do. We will do. Thank you for talking to me today, Danielle.
You're welcome. Bye.